One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Albert Camus. Good afternoon, Dr. Jewell, Mrs. Lyons, Dr. Schlanger, faculty, staff, and my fellow students. The tale of Sisyphus is a story about a king who tried to cheat death, forced to eternally push a boulder up a hill, only for it to fall down every time he reached the top. Some think this story means that Sisyphus is being punished, to have to do something that he knows will have no effect in the grand scheme of things. This idea is the same way many people live their lives. They live carelessly, realizing that they are tiny compared to the size of just the planet, let alone the universe. They live believing that anything and everything they can and will do will mean nothing. And they're right. But Sisyphus, a man subject to eternal torture, must be imagined happy. This is because, although he knows that nothing will change, he still pushes the boulder up the hill. He knows that no matter how many billions of times he rolls that rock up that mountain, he will never get it to the top without falling down. His entire existence is perfectly predictable, with no surprises, nothing to change, yet he still experiences it. He knows what will happen will not change. He can trust in the fact that that boulder will roll back down, because it will. He knows for a fact that nothing he does will ever matter, but does it anyway. He has no future to look forward to or dread. He lives in the present. Life, in my eyes, isn't a sprint nor a marathon. It's a climb, a desperate scramble up a faraway peak. Some spend their entire time looking for shortcuts, only to realize there are none. Some give up, lingering on how easy it could have been, never knowing how close they actually were to the peak. Some try to find out what the peak truly is and how to get there, only to waste their time on planning. Others try to follow climbers on their path, but the truth is, the mountain isn't the same for everyone. Some climbers start halfway up the mountain, others start at the rock bottom. For some, the mountain is but a small hill, while for others, it's a slippery cliff with seemingly no way up. Even though no climber starts at the same place, they all have one thing in common. Their journey ends. At one point, unexpectedly or predictably, any climber that has climbed enough steps never to reach the cliffside again. Their spot solidifies, becoming part of the very mountain they once climbed. These climbers become handholds and footholds for the next climber to grab onto, to extend their arm ever so slightly further, seeing the cliff just out of reach, if only they could extend their hand an inch closer and grasp on to all that they've ever wanted, all that they've ever known. What happens when the climber does reach the top, grasping on to their long-awaited cliff? They lay down on the warm, grassy mountaintop, overjoyed at the fact that they did everything they had ever wanted. But something was missing. Every time they had ever reached, yearning for the mountaintop, was all for this moment. The cool wind blowing through their hair, the soft, thin blades of grass between their fingers, the warm rays of sunlight hitting their face. Yet, in that moment, there was something saddening. It wasn't that they were underwhelmed. Everything was exactly as they had imagined. But that was the underwhelming part. It was everything they had hoped for. There would be no other peak above that cliff for the climber to reach the top, only to discover there was another summit to reach. It was flat ground, overlooking all the climbers' paths, the ones that intersected midway through, the ones that separated too early, the climbers that wouldn't ever grab another rock to become handholds themselves on the mountain. They'd see everything and own everything, only to truly have nothing. After all, what's a climbing pit with no mountain to stab it into? What are climbing spikes with no ice to grip? Their only wish, once they had everything, would be to have nothing again. They'd give anything to be back at the bottom, yearning for the top, so that they could never reach it. During their climb, they know exactly what they wanted to climb towards, not once feeling lost on their path. They'd realize that all they'd ever wanted was to still want something. The mountain and its climber, the climber and their mountain. The climber and their mountain are always in parallel, and can only exist in parallel, for if the two meet, neither would have any purpose. The mountain gives the climber a path, the climber gives the mountain a peak. This is the life of the climber, not the runner, whose sole achievement is when the finish line is passed. For the climber, the finish line It's every rock, every ledge, every scrape, every cut, every bruise, every scar. The mountain isn't made up of rocks, but scars. Scars are the climb, scars are the climber. The climber only ever climbs up because they have fallen down, and at rock bottom, the only way they can go is up. This is the life of the climber, or rather, the climber of life. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Thank you.